Welcome to Vantage. We're coming to you live from Gandhinagar. Across the border in Pakistan, there is talk of a security pact between Pakistan and the United States. What's more, they're keeping it secret. Is Washington planning to sell weapons to Islamabad? And if that is the case, what does it mean for India? Also, why can't Joe Biden shake off America's obsession with Pakistan? We'll take a closer look at this strange relationship. In China, the state is telling teenagers how long they can use phones. Just 2 hours a day if you're under 18. In Canada, tech firms like Meta and Google have stopped carrying news. We'll tell you why. Over in the US, Harvard University is in trouble. They are being accused of human trafficking of all things. And the internet is obsessed with a new sensation, a bear that acts like a human. We'll get you all this and more, but first the headlines tonight. The drone war intensifies. Russia says it has downed 7 drones near its capital. There has been a surge in such attacks targeting Moscow. Ukraine claims to have repelled more than 20 drones over Kiev. It's the 8th straight day that the Ukrainian capital has come under attack. Morgan Stanley upgrades India's economy to quote-unquote overweight. The brokerage firm says India is on track to achieving GDP growth of 6.2%. It comes just 4 months after India was elevated from underweight to equal weight. But bad news for China. It has been downgraded to equal weight. Iran doubles down on the hijab rule. A new draconian law proposes long jail terms for offenders and the use of artificial intelligence to identify women who breach the dress code. This comes ahead of the 1-year anniversary of the mass protests. 22-year-old Masha Amini's death had sparked the protest across the country. Greenpeace activists arrested after they target the UK Prime Minister's home. They climb onto the roof of Rishi Sunak's North Yorkshire home and cover it in black fabric. This after Sunak gave the green light to hundreds of new oil and gas licenses in the North Sea. The UK Prime Minister was not present at his home at the time of this incident. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his wife Sophie are separating. Prime Minister Trudeau made the announcement in an Instagram post. They were married for 18 years and have 3 children. Make new friends but keep the old. These lines were written by a Welsh composer in the 19th century. But they still make sense, not just in personal relations, even in geopolitics. Case in point, the United States and Pakistan. Pakistan's cabinet has reportedly approved a key security pact with Washington. It is called CISMOA, Communication, Interoperability and Security Memorandum of Agreement. I know it's a mouthful. This pact is not new though. It was signed between Pakistan and the United States in the year 2005. Its validity was for 15 years, so in 2020 the pact expired. Almost 3 years later, a new one has been approved, and this too is set to run for 15 years. But why is it important? Because the US does not sign such agreements with every country. This pact is reserved for allies and defense partners. If you sign this deal with America, it's easier to buy weapons and hardware. So the obvious question is this. Is the US planning to sell weapons to Pakistan? And if they are, it is a risky move. Last year, the Pentagon approved an F-16 package for Pakistan. It was worth around $450 million. India was not impressed. We know Joe Biden has invested a lot in his relationship with India, but selling more hardware will raise alarm in New Delhi. Will Biden risk that? Most experts say he won't. But the way this deal was handled is fishy. We have seen no official statement from either side. But American and Pakistani sources have confirmed this news to multiple agencies. So why the secrecy? Are they trying to downplay it? Or is there something more at play? I'm afraid we'll have to wait and see. The US and Pakistan have a long history of defense sales. In 2006, they signed deals worth $3.5 billion. Pakistan was America's biggest customer that year. Their arsenal is filled with American hardware, from F-16 fighter jets to howitzers to attack helicopters. But in the last few years, a new seller has emerged, and that seller is China. From 2017 to 2021, China made up 72% of Pakistan's demand. Just one problem though, the products are substandard. Pakistan's army has been complaining about China's hardware. The F-16s are still their frontline jets. To repair and refurbish them, Pakistan needs American support. But how should India see this move? Repairing F-16s will not worry New Delhi. It doesn't really alter the power balance in the region. India's military remains far superior. But what if it goes beyond that? What if Washington sells new weapons and hardware to Pakistan? That would be worrying. The US hasn't said anything about selling new weapons, but they have talked about Shehbaz Sharif's recent offer. The Pakistan Prime Minister claims he's willing to talk with India. The US says we support this idea.
As we have long said, we support direct dialogue between India and Pakistan on issues of concern. That has long been our position.
So what exactly is happening between Pakistan and the Americans? It's a very strange equation. After 9/11, Washington needed Pakistan's help in Afghanistan, hence all the weapons and funds. But now that's not the case. Pakistan has little strategic value to the US. In comparison, India's stock has increased. So Joe Biden has largely ignored Pakistan. No high-level visits, no political engagements, not much trade either. Washington considered Pakistan a lost cause. But throughout this period, one thing has not changed, and that is the military relationship. In February, rumors spread that Army Chief Asim Munir was in the US. The Army denied it, the Army of Pakistan. Then last month, he hosted a top American general, Eric Kurilla, who heads the US Central Command. And now you have this defense pact. Pakistan is like a bad habit the Americans can't ignore. The question is why? It's not about countering China, because let's face it, that ship sailed years ago. Pakistan today is effectively a Chinese vassal. Many experts say it's because of the nuclear weapons. That's why the Americans are still in this game. The US fears Pakistan's nukes may fall into the wrong hands. Biden talked about this last year. He called Pakistan one of the most dangerous countries in the world. He said their nukes have no cohesion. Could that explain America's military cooperation? Well, maybe, but it is still a risky game. You cannot expect India to ignore continued military cooperation with Pakistan. There will be a red line. It's about where India will draw that line. And we're not done with Pakistan on this show. We also want to talk about CPEC tonight, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It's like that startup which wanted to become a unicorn. There was big money driving it. Its valuation skyrocketed. But thanks to poor management, everything fell apart. Now, the main investor is unhappy, and there are fears that the project might go bust. This story is about how Pakistan is trying to save CPEC. Let's begin with some recent events. Last month, Pakistan celebrated a birthday. CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, had turned 10. They had a cake-cutting ceremony, not making this up. This is what Pakistan did. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was there, along with China's ambassador in Islamabad. They held a ceremony and they cut a cake. A few weeks later, China's vice premier flew to Islamabad. There was another ceremony. Some new projects were launched. The vice premier had a message from Xi Jinping. It was a congratulatory letter. It tried to paint CPEC as a win. Xi Jinping said CPEC is a vivid testament to China's all-weather friendship with Pakistan. The Chinese president promised to keep supporting CPEC. But the festivities did not last long. Just days after the celebrations, Pakistan began looking for more investors. It is looking for new partners who can put money in CPEC. And one of the candidates on their shortlist is Turkey. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has made a new pitch. He has offered a trilateral arrangement, China, Pakistan, Turkey. But why bring in Turkey? In the hope of bringing in more money. This is what Shehbaz Sharif said, and I'm quoting, I think all three nations can benefit from the potential of the CPEC, which has been a big success. Well, this is a bit of an exaggeration, and this is not a new pitch. Last year, Sharif was in Istanbul. He met the Turkish president and made the same offer. Sharif also told Erdogan that if Turkey is willing to invest, he will be, quote-unquote, happy to take this up with the Chinese leadership. Almost a year has passed. Ankara has not committed yet. But that's not stopping the Pakistanis from trying. From Imran Khan to Shehbaz Sharif, every Pakistani leader has played salesman for CPEC. They've tried to sell the expansion, to turn CPEC into something bigger than just a bilateral project. In this effort, Islamabad has reached out to many countries. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, Afghanistan, even the United States of America talk about being ambitious. Pakistan has tried its luck, but has not made much progress. When Imran Khan was Prime Minister, he hosted the Saudi Crown Prince. He even chauffeured him around. You may remember these pictures. They're from 2019, Imran Khan driving MBS around Pakistan. He wasn't doing it to show off his driving skills. Imran Khan wanted investments. And he did manage to get something. The Saudi Crown Prince promised an oil refinery, a $10 billion project to be built in Gwadar. It was supposed to be a part of CPEC, but the project did not take off. And the reason was China. Pakistan wanted the refinery as part of CPEC. China did not want it. They did not allow it. So for 4 years, the deal was in cold storage, but recently there was some movement. This $10 billion deal was revived, but the terms were changed. The refinery is no longer a part of CPEC. It's the same story with other projects too. Lots of promises, but little to show for them, and no third partner. We come to the question, why does Pakistan need one? Why do they need a third partner? Because the project has become too big to sustain, and Beijing is not keeping its promises. When Pakistan and China started CPEC, the investment target was $62 billion. That's the number that Beijing promised, $62 billion of investment in Pakistan. How much of that has materialized? Less than $28 billion. That's according to one estimate. What about the rest of the money? Well, it seems China has had a rethink. It has slowed down investments. As of last year, just 3 out of 15 CPEC projects were completed. China wants to see progress. It wants the existing investments to be completed and to bear fruit. Only then will it pour in more money, which makes sense. Which is also why Pakistan wants money from another source to jumpstart stalled projects. Also to reduce some of the financial liability. But that's not a decision that Pakistan can take. China controls every aspect of CPEC. All investments are subject to Beijing's approval. So even if a partner is interested, they cannot get in without Beijing's nod. And that leaves Pakistan completely at China's mercy. 10 years into CPEC, this is what they have. About $23 billion in Chinese debt and a bloated infrastructure project with no progress and no takers. Earlier we spoke about setting the limit, about drawing red lines. Well, China has drawn another one. It cuts right through the middle of civil liberties and choice. Let me explain. China's cyber regulator has come out with some suggestions. They're telling teens how to use smartphones. If you're aged between 16 and 18, you can use a smartphone for 2 hours a day. Between 8 and 16, 1 hour a day, and below 8, just 8 minutes. I'll repeat that. Just 8 minutes of screen time if you're below 8 years of age in China. There are internet curbs too. No mobile internet from 10 p.m. at night to 6 a.m., obviously in the morning. On paper, this is supposed to be a choice. Parents may or may not enforce it. They say it's a choice, but we all know how choice works in China. So tech companies are feeling the heat already. Their shares plunged on Wednesday and Thursday. Alibaba was down more than 2%, Tencent almost 0.5% down. The question is, why is China doing this? Because children are spending too much time on their phones. Eye problems are on the rise, so is internet and phone addiction. So what does Beijing do? Impose hard limits on how much they can use it. Beijing has done this before. In 2021, remember, they curbed online gaming. They said teen gamers can only play for 3 hours a week. But do these hard limits really work? We'll answer that question. But first, let's understand the problem. Screen time is a major issue among teenagers. Doctors say the ideal limit is 2 hours a day. And how much time do teens actually spend? A lot more than 2 hours. In the US, around 7.5 hours per day. In India, around 7.3 hours every day. That's the kind of screen time they have. More than 60% of Indian children have more than 2 hours of screen time. This leads to all kinds of problems, like irregular sleep, mood swings, excessive snacking, and fatigue. So the bottom line is this: it is not desirable. Children should not be spending 7 hours on the phone in a day. And it's not like they're watching quality content. Most often it's games or reels. So China's objective is good. But what about their method? Do other countries have similar strategies? Very few of them do. For example, Taiwan does. Parents there are legally obliged to limit teenage screen time. No hard limits though. It just says, quote unquote, not beyond a reasonable time. And if parents ignore this, they can be fined. How much? Up to $1,600. That should be enough incentive, I guess. Taiwan has also banned gadgets for children below 2 years of age. It's illegal to use them. South Korea is another example. They have limited children's access to online games. Between midnight and 6 a.m., children cannot play online. But do these curbs work? For starters, imposing them is a nightmare. More than 20% of China's population is under the age of 18. How do you regulate all of them? Ask parents to take away their phones? Or tweak the software to limit screen time? Neither method is ideal. Tech companies say it's nearly impossible. Parents and children will always find loopholes. But that's just one part of the problem. The second is the concept of it. Should governments be asking children what and how much to watch? It's a slippery slope. By that logic, shouldn't cigarettes and alcohols also be banned? Banning or curbing isn't always the answer. In fact, it can be counterproductive. Children may grow to resent their parents or consider themselves untrustworthy of devices. You don't want that happening. A better solution would be parent-driven. Parents know what is best for their kids. What they need is good advice and plans, not legally enforceable ones, just good old tips. After that, it's all about your creativity. And I know it's hard to make children listen. But that applies to everything, really, not just screen time. It's not like children love eating green vegetables or finish homework on time or sleep when you ask them to. You need to figure out a way to make them do these things. And screen time is no different. The state's job is not to interfere in parenting. The state's job is to tell parents what is desirable and leave it at that. Thankfully, no such restrictions in India yet. India is still in the midst of a digital boom. India has some of the world's most affordable internet plans, and there is a growing demand for devices, for laptops and tablets of all sizes. But New Delhi has issued a new order today, and it may have a bearing on your next purchase. India has imposed an import restriction on devices like laptops. Companies that sell these gadgets will have to get a license to import. To some, it may hark back to the infamous license Raj. Our next report tells you what this move is all about.
If you've ever tried to buy a laptop, your search for the perfect device might follow a series of predictable steps. You probably begin with a Google search and type in words like best laptops under 50,000. The gurus at Google throw up a long list of names. There are photographs and a long list of specs filled with tech jargon that honestly even an Oxford dictionary cannot explain. Once you have spent enough time perusing all the advice online, the entire product catalogue is a blur. The configurations don't make sense anymore. What you're left with are just names like HP, Dell, Samsung, and Apple. Your choice probably hinges on the brand. Have you ever wondered why there are no Indian names among the top brands? Probably because there are not enough laptops made in India. That's true for personal computers and tablets too. India wants to fix that problem. It has come up with new rules, a new licensing requirement for companies to follow. Until now, such devices could have been imported freely. There were no requirements as such. But that's about to change. Now, manufacturers would need a license to get their products to India. Why make the process harder? The intention is to get these companies to make in India. That isn't really happening right now. From April to June this year, almost $20 billion worth of electronics were imported to India. This includes laptops, tablets, and personal computers. These devices make up almost 1.5% of India's total imports in a year. Nearly half of this supply comes from China right now. New Delhi wants to change that. There are now incentives on offer. Earlier this year, India announced a $2.1 billion scheme. How does it work? If the manufacturers make in India and exceed an annual target, they'll be entitled to a cashback on the goods that leave the factory. There will be a ripple effect on the economy too. New Delhi expects the scheme will generate about 200,000 jobs. 75,000 will be direct, the rest will be indirect. Why make such a push now? India is trying to capitalize on its past success. Earlier, New Delhi had introduced a similar production scheme for smartphones. Tech giants like Apple capitalized on them. 7% of all iPhones produced in the world now carry the Made in India tag. New Delhi wants to capitalize on this success. The goal is ambitious, but there are apprehensions. Industry officials say the new license requirement might affect their ability to offer new products quickly. Indians may need to wait longer to get their hands on new models after launch. Further, the new requirement might dampen the festive spirit. The restrictions come just before the festive season, the time when companies plan attractive offers to woo buyers. They'll now need to come up with a new plan, probably one that might need to manufacture in India.
Our next story is about news itself. We live in a world where everything, including water, is paid for, yet news continues to be free. Just think about it. You probably see multiple news videos on Twitter or Instagram. How much do you pay for that? Nothing. But those videos are making money for the platform. They are increasing traffic, selling ads, and creating profits. How much of that do news companies get? Again, nothing. Twitter does not pay us for news, neither does Meta. But recently, there has been a pushback. We are focusing on two cases tonight. The first is from Canada. Their government has passed a new law. It requires tech giants to negotiate deals with news agencies, basically pay them for their content. But have these companies agreed? Well, not all of them. Meta has decided to remove news content in Canada. They say we are not paying. And what's their excuse? Meta believes it's a question of who needs whom. They claim news companies use their platforms to increase visibility, to boost their bottom line. They also claim that users don't come to them for news. They come for other things, but end up seeing the news anyway. Is that true? Well, this claim brings us to the second case. A French news agency is suing Twitter. It's called AFP, Agence France Presse. It's basically a copyright case. AFP wants to know how much traffic is generated by their content. If they know this, they can demand payments accordingly. Just one problem though. Twitter won't tell them. Elon Musk has called the case bizarre. His argument is the same as Meta. He says news companies benefit from their presence on Twitter. People click on links, thus generating traffic. If that is the case, why not release the data? Why not show us the actual numbers? The truth is that this system helps both sides. Internet platforms get more traffic thanks to news. At the same time, news platforms get more reach thanks to Meta or Twitter. Both things are true. But only one side is making the money of it. Only one side is getting paid. Imagine you watch your favorite news show on Twitter or Instagram. You haven't bought their subscription on TV. You just watch them online. Who benefits in such cases? Twitter and Instagram get traffic every time you watch. And what about the news platform, the news channel or website? They get a viewer, but no money. And this is highly unfair to news agencies and publications. Also look at who's bringing what to the table. Twitter is offering a platform, no content, no inputs, no information. It's creators and journalists who are putting content out, who are enriching these platforms. And in the process, the platforms get money. But the service does not. The system has to change, especially with media houses struggling to generate revenue. And it's not like it's impossible. Australia imposed a similar rule in 2021. At first, Meta and Google pulled the same stunt. They threatened to remove news from their platforms. But eventually, they backed down. Today, more than 30 deals have been signed. Put together, they have made $200 million for news companies. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but we are talking about internet giants here. Meta makes $120 billion in 1 year. Google, more than $280 billion. If anyone can afford it, they certainly can. More countries should consider doing what Australia and Canada have done. Last we checked, Meta hasn't gone bankrupt in Australia. Neither has Google. So the idea is financially feasible. Even India is thinking along these lines. In the month of January this year, the Information and Broadcasting Ministry gave a clear message. It said big tech must share revenue with news agencies. No laws have been introduced yet, but at least the intent is there. Going forward, we need to admit and accept two things. News and big tech cannot be separated. This relationship is here to stay. And secondly, this relationship leads to or has a revenue imbalance. Big tech is taking the bigger chunk of profits. We need laws to correct this problem. But we also need internet platforms to be more understanding. What do you think of when someone talks about Harvard? Legendary institution, Ivy League, best university in the world. What about a shopping mall for human remains? Because that's what it is set to have become. This story is about the Harvard Medical School. It's embroiled in what's being called the Harvard morgue scandal. The charge is that Harvard was trafficking human body parts. These bodies were donated for science, but parts of 400 such bodies were allegedly sold across the US. Now there's a lawsuit against the college, a class action lawsuit. 19 more families have joined it. Here's a report.
In June this year, some US colleges, including Harvard Medical School, were rocked by morbid allegations. Harvard's morgue was being used as a warehouse. One of the employees working for the school was dealing in human body parts. He was selling the remains of people who had donated their bodies to Harvard for science. They donated to Harvard's Anatomical Gifts program that's used to train doctors. But after the training was completed, these remains were being trafficked by a worker in Harvard's morgue. The Harvard morgue manager's involvement came to light after US authorities busted a nationwide body part trafficking ring. The morgue employee, Cedric Lodge, has been indicted on multiple counts of conspiring to transport and sell human remains. He's been accused along with his wife and several other people. They've allegedly been doing this for years, since 2018. The Harvard morgue manager is accused of supplying body parts till about August 2022. That's 4 years, and reports say almost 400 people's body parts were trafficked. They ended up in macabre places, like a doll shop called Cat's Creepy Creations, which sold dolls made with real human skulls. Some of those skulls allegedly came from the Harvard Medical School's morgue. There are even more horrific details. Human brains sold for $200. Faces that had already been dissected sold for $600. Skin sold to someone looking to tan it and make leather. It's disgusting and disrespectful to the donors and their families. The donors were people who decided to donate their bodies to science, to make one last difference in the world. These donations are essential for medical studies. Aspiring doctors and dentists need to study them to better understand the human body. And many donate their bodies to help train a new generation of medical professionals. But there's an implicit understanding people have when donating their bodies, that the remains will be treated with respect. That once the studies are over, they will be turned to ashes and returned to the families. It's a solemn oath that Harvard seems to have violated, and now the college is being sued for this. 19 more families have joined a class action lawsuit against Harvard. The lawsuit alleges that Harvard abandoned the remains in a facility that was a place of freakish desecration where, according to the indictments, criminals were allowed to roam and pick over loved ones' remains for bits like trinkets at a flea market. That's what the lawsuit says. Harvard denies the charges and has not spoken much about the case, saying they do not comment on ongoing investigations. The college has issued an apology, and it has called the morgue employees' actions an abhorrent betrayal. But other than that, the college has maintained its silence. There are multiple ongoing lawsuits. Many families have come out to demand accountability from Harvard. While the Harvard Medical School is not directly involved in the trafficking, it is being sued under a law which says an employer is responsible for illegal activity at the workplace. If the college is found guilty, it may provide a measure of peace to the distraught families. But the whole Harvard morgue scandal is a wake-up call. Universities need to ensure this kind of thing can never happen again, especially in places like Harvard. The reputation it has built over the years cannot be a shield to paper over such cracks.
Now to Israel, which remains divided over a new law. Thousands of people have been protesting for the past 7 months. The judiciary has been at loggerheads with the government. The divide is over a new law, a law that gives the government more influence over the courts. Critics say it compromises Israel's democracy. And it is designed to protect the Prime Minister who faces multiple cases in court. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's on trial in 3 separate cases. Should he and his government have more power over courts? That's what Israel is debating. And now the matter has reached the court, Israel's Supreme Court, in fact. It is hearing a case today, a petition to scrap Netanyahu's new law. The government calls it judicial reform. Part of it was already passed last week in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. Now, the Israeli Supreme Court will look into it. In September, all 15 members of Israel's Supreme Court will sit to hear petitions against the overhaul. This will be the first time that the entire Supreme Court sits down for a case. It's a watershed moment in Israel. And this hearing is expected to be a teaser for the upcoming battle. But what do these developments really mean for Israel, its democracy and its security? We put these questions to Israel's former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. He's the Prime Minister who preceded Netanyahu in his first stint in power, and he gave us his perspective and insights into the chaos that is threatening to tear Israel apart. Joining me is Ehud Olmert. He's the former Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Olmert, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to Firstpost.
I'm delighted.
The judicial reform in Israel has been called a lot of things. Some have called it a political crisis, others have called it a full-blown constitutional crisis and chaos. How would you describe what's happening in your country?
Well, there is a crisis. We haven't yet arrived at the constitutional crisis, but we are very close to it. Depends very much on the decision of the Supreme Court, which will convene on the 12th of September with all the 15 justices of the Supreme Court. This is the time in the history of the State of Israel that the Supreme Court will sit with all the members of the court. These demonstrations that are taking place almost on a daily basis and during the weekends with hundreds of thousands of protesters that are marching in the streets in the center of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and other parts of the country.
Last month, you were discussing these reforms and you'd said, and I quote, "The government has decided to threaten the foundations of Israeli democracy, and this is not something we can accept or that we can tolerate." You call these reforms a serious threat, and you said that this may lead to a civil war. Do you still believe that? Do you think that this reform will push Israel towards a civil war?
Well, I certainly hope that we will not be pushed into a civil war, but I can't rule out the possibility. Considering what you have just now quoted from what I say, which is that Israel is a democracy, has been a democracy from the day of its proclamation. But democracy, human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of movement are fundamental basic principles that we have to protect. And if there is a danger that some of these principles will be challenged by the present government and will be changed because of the desire of this government to protect the personal status of the Prime Minister and also to create a necessary environment for messianic extremists, radicals, anti-Palestinian elements in the government, it may bring the two camps in Israel into hopefully not, but it might create also a violent confrontation.
There's also considerable opposition from military reservists. Many of them have threatened to refuse to report for service if this goes on. How do you think this will impact Israel's security?
Look, let's take it to the most extreme option. Let's assume, which I hope will never happen, that tomorrow morning Israel will be attacked by the Hezbollah in the north, by the Iranians, by others, I don't know. You can be certain that all the Israeli reservists, the pilots, the cyber fighters, the intelligence soldiers, the soldiers of the special commando units, all will join in to fight in order to defend the state of Israel. However, the fact that so many of the combat pilots of the Israeli Air Force, which I think, by the way, being former Prime Minister, but being in charge of all the Israeli military and security for years, I can tell you the Israeli Air Force is by far the best, the most efficient Air Force in the world. When hundreds of the Israeli Air Force combat pilots that are still serving on a regular basis as volunteers, they say, we don't want to volunteer anymore because we are not prepared to fight in order to defend a country which is not democratic. This is a major event in the life of our country. This has never happened before.
Do you see a role for the international community in what's happening in your country? Some of your closest allies, including the United States, have been very public and very vocal in their criticism of what's happening.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think the international community is fully aware of what happens. The pictures, the videos from the streets of Israel are spread all over the universe. And that's why you care to interview me from India, which I plan to visit at the end of August to make a speech in one of your universities. Yes, the international community is very concerned and is unhappy, and I think it spells out its discontent with the government policies. But I must say that I'm not certain that it's enough. And I say it, and I don't retract, I repeat. I called President Biden, whom I know personally very well, and we used to work together in former times before he was president. I called the United States to reassess its relations with the state of Israel and to make its concerns a lot more explicit and focused on what Israel is doing, because the basis of the relations between our two countries, the United States and Israel, mostly the United States and Israel, but also others, is the common values of democracy, of integrity, of tolerance, of all these basic ingredients that characterize democracy. And if Israel appears to stay away from some of it, then the United States should caution the Israeli government in the most explicit and focused manner that it will bear serious consequences for matters which are of great importance to the state of Israel. Yes, if you ask me, then I can say I appeal to President Biden, help Israel to save itself from itself.
Mr. Olmert, thank you very much for joining us with this. We hope you have a good visit to India, and we hope to have a conversation with you very soon when things have settled down and this crisis has been resolved in your country. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Slow and steady wins the race. It's a famous proverb. It's probably true, unless, of course, you're talking about athletics. That's one arena where being slow doesn't help. Recently, the world saw this in action, the slug-paced kind, thanks to a Somali runner. The Summer World University Games were held in China this week. The competition included a 100-meter dash. Now, a clip of that race has gone viral, and this sprinter from Somalia, Nasra Ali Abukar, is making news all over the world, but for all the wrong reasons. See it for yourself. As soon as the starting gun is fired, Abukar falls behind. Within 6 seconds, she's trailing far behind. So far behind that she soon disappears from the camera frame. Eventually, everyone crosses the finish line, but Abukar flounders about 10 seconds behind. She's at about half the speed of her closest competitor, and even though she finishes dead last, she does a little skip in the air. Full marks for confidence, we say. She looked pleased with herself. But the spectators did not share this feeling. And now this video is making rounds on social media. There's disbelief, ridicule, and anger. Abukar has drawn harsh criticism. Her performance has triggered a number of questions. Why was she representing Somalia? Is she even an athlete? Who approved her participation? Somalians can't help but feel a twinge of betrayal. They say it reflects poorly on their country, and they're not wrong. It's not just about the embarrassingly slow run, though. Abukar has stirred a controversy in Somalia for another reason, too. She gave no evidence of any background in elite athletics. Her entry is not even on the World Athletics database. So how did she make it to the team? How did she make it to these games? Nepotism, apparently. Reports say Abukar is the niece of a Somali athletics official. This claim has not been verified so far, but it is making waves across social media, and the rage is palpable. The Somali Athletics Federation has announced an investigation. They will investigate how Abukar found a place on the team. Somalia's sports minister has also publicly apologized about what happened. The chairwoman of the Athletics Federation in the country has been suspended. She's been accused of nepotism. If found guilty, she will be facing legal action. Does this story surprise you? Or does it evoke a sense of cynicism and resignation? Because nepotism is as old as social power games. Nepotism is the abuse of power. Nepo babies are known to flourish in practically every industry. But since we're talking about sports, let's focus on sports. Look at the NBA. It is filled with sons of former players, at least 35 of them, including Steph and Seth Curry, Devin Booker, and Klay Thompson. Bronny James is also likely to declare for NBA draft next year. He's the son of this generation's basketball GOAT, LeBron James. Now, success in a sport does not require a parent who played it too, which is obviously true, but it sure does help, both in terms of nature and nurture. Children of sports veterans grow up thinking and talking about the sport. They see it play out in front of them. And it's not surprising that they would want to be part of it. It's also not shocking that their parents would want to train them. They have an innate sense of what the child needs, both on and off the field. That's a big differentiator, but not the problem. The problem arises when such a privilege is taken advantage of, when Nepo babies get a leg up, no matter their skills, or when they unfairly benefit from industry connections. Many call Sharif O'Neal a clear example of this. He is the son of Shaquille O'Neal, one of the greatest NBA players. Sharif failed to make the draft this past summer, but anyway ended up getting a six-figure deal with the G League. What is this if not nepotism? Becoming an athlete means laying it all out on the field. It all comes down to your skills as a sports person. Nepotism will only take you so far. Now, Abukar may have sprinted up the rungs thanks to family connections, but she also ran straight into controversy. A big example of nepotism going wrong. And not just a trending Somalian video, but also a lesson for many. After all, relatives can only do so much for your career. A new scandal has taken over China. And trust me, we could barely believe it. Bad puns aside, it all started with a viral video. It showed a sun bear standing on its hind legs in a Chinese zoo. Sounds normal, right? But the internet was not so sure. Netizens had just one question. Is that a bear or a human in a bear costume? Now this zoo, the Hangzhou Zoo, was quick to clarify. They said all their bears were, well, just bears. But the internet is still divided. In fact, many are flocking to this Chinese zoo to see it for themselves. Our next report tells you about this debate and why it is getting a little unbearable.
It's not a grizzly bear, it's not a dog, and it's definitely not a human dressed in a costume. Meet Angela.
Hello! Hello!
She's a 4-year-old Malayan sun bear, a species known for the golden patches of fur on their chests. Angela was leading a peaceful existence, waving at tourists, eating bounties of cucumbers and carrots. But now she has become an internet sensation. In fact, Angela finds herself in the middle of an intense debate, a debate that questions her very existence. It started with this viral video right here. The video showed a sun bear standing on its hind legs. This was in the Hangzhou Zoo in China. Of course, the internet was shocked. They were befuddled by this weird human-like behavior and asked whether the bear was an imposter. Is Angela offended by this comment? Well, no. Offense is the strong suit of only humans. So Angela went on with her peaceful life. But the Hangzhou Zoo could not. They had to issue a statement dispelling all these rumors. The zoo said Angela was in fact a bear, and she wasn't looking for a human substitute anytime soon. But the internet is still not convinced. People are flocking to the Hangzhou Zoo only to check one thing. Is Angela really a bear? Or is it just a guy in a fur suit? The number of daily visitors to the zoo has gone up by 30%. They are visiting, sometimes from different parts of China, all to see Angela, talk about being a local celebrity. But Angela's fame isn't just restricted to China. She has become so famous, or should I say infamous, that even a UK zoo waded into the debate. It uploaded a picture of one of its sun bears called Kyra and talked about the human-like behavior of the species. Sun bears are a unique species. They are half the size of an American black bear, about 4 to 5 feet. And yes, they do have human-like behavior. Like standing on their feet or waving. Does that make them a human in a fursuit? Absolutely not. But is the internet convinced? Well, barely for now.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with the United States. A robbery attempt went horribly wrong here. A masked man tried to steal from a grocery store, but the store owner caught hold of him and, well, went to town with a beating. In Michigan, a couple rescued people from a burning boat seconds before it exploded. In Turkey, the military detonated artillery shells found underwater off the Black Sea coast. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1960, the West African nation of Niger gained full independence from France. The French began colonizing Niger in the 1890s. It was not easy, though. People of all ethnicities united to resist and fight back. After 2 decades of intense fighting, Niger came under the French rule in 1922. It was one of the last African countries to be colonized by the Europeans. We're leaving you with that. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Ain't nothing you can do, man, until police come in. Can I get a switch? Let me get a switch. Don't do that, man. Don't do that. Get off the boat.
Get off the boat.
It's gonna blow. You guys want to jump out right now?
Jump out right now.
Get away from me.
Get away. Get away.